You can always tell when a canine senses trouble. It's in their eyes, that piercing stare that slices through your calm like a knife. That night, as Diesel fixed his gaze on the back of the garbage truck, Officer Jake Nolan felt a chill crawl up his spine. It was supposed to be a routine end-of-shift walk, a quick 10-minute stroll beneath the icy glow of streetlights before heading home to microwave leftovers and crash into bed. But Diesel had other ideas. And thank goodness for that, because just 10 feet from a roaring garbage truck on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, a life was about to disappear without a trace, unless someone paid attention. Jake gave the leash a gentle tug. "Come on, buddy, let's go." But Diesel wouldn't budge. The retired K9 stood firm on the curb, ears forward, body tense. Then out of nowhere he barked, not a casual bark, not a playful yip. This was a deep, booming bark, sharp, urgent, insistent, again and again. The garbage truck driver, a burly man in a neon vest, climbed down from the cab, looking irritated. "Everything all right over there?" Jake raised a hand. "Sorry, he's usually calm. Something must have set him off." But Diesel wasn't scared. He was warning them. Jake hadn't seen that posture in years, not since Afghanistan. Back then, when Diesel barked like that, it meant danger, bombs, or worse. But this was small-town Indiana. Not a battlefield, not even a crime scene. So why did Jake suddenly feel like disaster was looming? The truck rumbled forward a few feet, its hydraulic arms grabbing a big black bin. Diesel lunged at it, barking frantically. Okay, Jake muttered, stepping between the dog and the trash can. "What is it? What's going on?" He placed a hand on Diesel's shoulder. The dog was shaking. At that moment, the truck's engine growled, and the bin started to lift. Diesel's barking grew louder, more desperate.
"Wait!" Jake yelled, waving at the driver.
"Stop the lift." The driver slammed the emergency brake. "What's wrong?" But Diesel had already darted toward the rear tire, teeth bared, barking into the shadows. Jake's heart pounded. He grabbed his flashlight and moved toward the bin, now hanging in the air, swaying. Something scraped inside, something light, something alive. He climbed onto the back step of the truck, peered into the bin, and froze. There was a sound, faint, muffled by layers of paper and rags, but unmistakable. Not metal, not machinery. A whimper, a cry, a baby's cry. Jake didn't hesitate. He shouted for the driver to lower the bin. Together they hauled it down and ripped open the lid. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of damp fabric and something metallic, blood. Jake pushed aside newspapers, then a towel, then another. His breath caught. There, curled up in a torn blanket, was a baby. A newborn, tiny, lips blue, eyes squeezed shut. A weak cry escaping like air from a leaky balloon. Jake staggered back. For a moment everything went silent. Then his training took over. "Call EMS now," he barked at the driver. "Tell them it's a newborn. Cold, maybe hurt." He shrugged off his jacket and wrapped the baby up, holding the fragile body close to his chest. Diesel stood nearby, quiet now, tail low, eyes fixed on the baby, protective, alert. Jake knelt beside him. "Good job, boy. You did great. If stories like this touch your heart, hit subscribe on Heroes for Animals. We bring you true tales of animal instinct, human bravery, and second chances every week. Don't miss out on what these incredible dogs are doing behind the scenes." The ambulance came racing down Maple Street 5 minutes later. But those 5 minutes felt endless. Jake sat on the curb cradling the baby, whispering softly, trying to keep it awake. "Hey there! You're safe now. You're going to be all right." The paramedics took over. Oxygen, warm blankets, a tiny IV. The garbage truck driver stood off to the side, pale and shaken. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see a thing. If your dog hadn't—" Jake nodded, unable to speak. After the ambulance left, Jake stayed behind to help the local officers search the area. It was the kind of neighborhood where porch lights flicker and doors are left unlocked. The sort of place where you'd never imagine a baby ending up in a trash can. Diesel stayed close to Jake the whole time, quiet and alert. The next day's news would call him a hero, but Jake already knew the truth. He glanced down at his old partner, the fur on Diesel's face now dusted with gray. "Still a soldier, aren't you?" he murmured. Diesel didn't wag his tail or move. He just kept his steady watch, as always. Jake didn't sleep that night. After the baby was taken to St. Mary's Medical Center, after the paperwork, after the slow walk back to the cruiser with Diesel riding in the back seat like he had in his younger days, Jake found himself at his kitchen table sitting in the dark, staring into space. The wind rattled the windows. December had Indiana in its grip, and even the heater struggled to keep the cold at bay. On the floor, Diesel finally let out a deep sigh and rested his head on Jake's boot. "You always know, don't you?" Jake whispered. He didn't need a reply. He'd seen it before. In war zones, in alleys, in barns thick with fear. Diesel never barked without a reason. But this was different. A baby left in a trash bin. 10 seconds later, and the truck would have crushed everything inside. That child would have become just another headline, another mystery, and no one would have known, except Diesel. The next morning, Jake went back to the scene. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The sidewalk was empty now, the garbage truck long gone. Jake parked the cruiser, clipped Diesel's leash, and walked the block slowly. A jogger passed by. A woman with a stroller nodded hello. 2 boys rode past on bikes, heading to school. Life went on as if nothing had happened. But someone here had done something unimaginable, and Jake needed answers. He crouched where Diesel had first barked. The scent would be gone by now, but Diesel circled slowly, nose to the ground, tail half raised, alert but calm. They turned the corner. A green bin sat by a mailbox, still full. Jake paused and lifted the lid. Just regular trash, but his instincts told him there was more. "Let's go around again," he said softly. Diesel turned without hesitation. It wasn't until their second lap that Diesel stopped again, this time in front of a white house with peeling shutters and a chain-link fence. The mailbox read Connor. Jake recognized the name. Harold Connor, a retired steelworker who mostly kept to himself. No record, not even a parking ticket. Jake watched as Diesel sniffed along the curb, nose twitching. Then Diesel sat, quiet and focused. Jake scanned the porch. On the 3rd step, something caught his eye. A torn piece of a baby wipe packet. He picked it up, slipped it into an evidence bag. Coincidence? Maybe. But then he noticed something else, half hidden behind the bushes at the side of the house. A plastic grocery bag. Jake stepped over, crouched down, and pulled it out. Inside were strips of cloth stained dark. Blood, maybe rust. It was hard to tell. There was also an empty formula bottle, a broken pacifier, and a crumpled note on lined paper. The ink had run from moisture, but Jake could still read the words. "I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. I had no choice." Jake's grip tightened on the bag. He looked at Diesel. "Looks like you were right again." Back at the station, Jake logged the items into evidence and handed them to forensics. The note was scanned, enhanced, and passed to Detective Lana Brooks, who specialized in cases like this, quiet ones with big consequences. Lana leaned in Jake's office doorway. "You think the baby came from that house?" she asked quietly. Jake nodded. "I think someone inside that house knows more than they're saying. Whether it's the mother or someone helping her, I can't say yet." Lana tapped her notepad. "You realize this could be much bigger than just a scared teenager abandoning a baby. This feels like coercion, maybe even abuse." Jake didn't answer right away. He stared out the window, watching Diesel resting in the shadow of the squad car. "We were seconds away from losing that child," he finally said. Lana nodded, understanding. Later that day, they reviewed security footage from a neighbor's Ring camera. At exactly 3:12 a.m., a figure appeared, emerging from the alley 2 doors down from the Connor house. Hood pulled up, shoulders hunched, carrying what looked like a large plastic bin. They watched in silence as the person turned the corner, set the container by the curb, and hurried away, not running but clearly anxious. The camera didn't catch a clear face, but the size, the way they moved, suggested someone young. A teenager, maybe even younger. Jake replayed the video over and over. There was something about the way the figure moved. Not careless, not hardened, but desperate, frightened. Lana voiced what Jake was thinking. That's not someone dumping trash. That's someone hoping not to be seen. The next evening, Jake returned to the Connor property with a search warrant. Harold Connor wasn't home. But in the back shed, half buried under old boards and empty beer crates, they found more evidence. Baby clothes, empty formula packets, a faded baby blanket with tiny stars stitched into it. In the corner on a dusty desk was a half-filled notebook. In the margin of one page, a message, "I can't tell anyone." "He said he'd hurt the baby if I did." Jake's stomach twisted. This wasn't just abandonment, this was fear. Back at the station, Diesel lay curled on a blanket by Jake's desk, eyes half closed. But when Jake spoke, Diesel's ears perked up. She didn't just leave that baby. She was running, trying to protect him from someone. Diesel let out a quiet huff. Jake leaned back, exhaustion weighing on him, but the pieces were starting to come together. Whoever the girl was, she didn't want to be found. but she'd left clues, not by accident, but out of hope. That night, Jake couldn't shake the memory. The baby's blue lips, Diesel barking until his chest shook, the bin rising toward the compactor, and somewhere, a young girl hiding behind locked doors, believing that giving up her child was safer than keeping him. What kind of world makes a kid think that? Jake wondered aloud, staring into the snowy night. "We're not done yet, buddy," he said. Diesel thumped his tail once, as if to say, "I'm with you." The next 2 days passed slowly, tension simmering beneath the surface. Jake worked at his desk, Diesel curled up by the heater vent, guarding the quiet. Outside, the December snow thickened, frost covering windshields, every breath hanging in the air like a secret. The baby, now called Baby Doe, remained stable at St. Mary's, wrapped in blankets, tiny monitors blinking beside him. Doctors said he was severely cold but otherwise unharmed. No signs of injury, no drugs, just left alone in the cold. But why? And who was responsible? Jake leaned forward and replayed the footage. There she was again, the hooded figure, 3:12 a.m., carrying the bin, leaving it by the curb, walking away. This time as she turned, the streetlight caught her face for a split second. Not enough for an ID, but enough to see a young cheek, a soft jawline. Maybe 15, 16 at most. Not a criminal. A scared kid. Detective Lana Brooks entered, holding a file. She dropped it on Jake's desk and sighed. "We traced the baby blanket," she said. "It came from a hospital supply batch sent to clinics in Evansville and Linton. So she probably gave birth at one of those clinics, maybe under a false name or no ID." Jake nodded. "So she's local, scared, and alone." Lana hesitated. "Or someone's hiding her." The thought hung in the air. They had the evidence, the scene, the child, but not the girl. That unsettled Jake. That evening, Jake returned to the Connor house. The porch light was off, curtains drawn, but as they passed the side gate, Diesel pulled at the leash. Jake opened it slowly. The backyard was empty except for an old shed and patches of snow. But Diesel stopped. Not at the shed, but near the trash bins by the alley. Jake followed, shining his flashlight around. Then he heard it, not a baby's cry, but a voice, soft and trembling in the cold. "I didn't want to hurt him." Jake froze, turning toward the sound. Behind the larger green trash bin, a teenage girl crouched. Thin, jeans streaked with dirt, hoodie pulled up to hide her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she might fall apart. Jake kept his tone gentle. "It's all right. I'm not here to arrest you." She didn't answer. Diesel sat quietly at Jake's side, calm and still. Jake took a slow step forward. "Were you the one who left the baby?" Her shoulders shook. "I just wanted him to live," she whispered. Jake knelt in the snow. "He's safe. He's at the hospital, and he's going to be okay." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't bring him home. He said if I told anyone, I'd disappear." Jake's heart clenched. "Who told you that?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. He's gone now." "It does matter," Jake said softly. "Because what you did, leaving your baby where someone could find him, that wasn't cruelty. That was hope." She looked at Diesel. He gave a single quiet bark. Jake nodded. "He saved your baby's life." A long silence passed. Then she whispered, "Can I see him? Just once?" Back at the station, Jake and Lana completed the paperwork to place the girl, Meline, into protective custody. She was 15, living in a foster home just a few blocks from where she'd left the bin. The man she'd mentioned, her foster father, was a known alcoholic, no criminal record but now under investigation. He'd told her no one would help, that she'd be sent to juvie if anyone found out, that girls like her weren't meant to be mothers. He'd convinced her that shame was her only option. So she carried her secret alone, gave birth in a borrowed clinic, wrapped her baby in an old blanket, and prayed someone would hear his cry before it was too late. 2 days later, Meline sat in a quiet pediatric room at St. Mary's. The baby, freshly bathed and bundled in yellow, slept peacefully in his crib. His cheeks were pink now, his tiny fingers twitching in sleep. Jake stood by the door, watching. Diesel lay at his feet, a silent guardian. Meline reached out and touched her son's hand, tears slipping down her face. "I named him Theo," she said softly. "After the nurse who helped me when he was born," Jake cleared his throat. "That's a good name. I still can't keep him, can I?" she asked. Jake didn't sugarcoat it. "I don't know what's next. But you did the right thing. That matters." Meline nodded. "I thought nobody would care."
"But your dog!"
He cared. Jake looked down at Diesel, who blinked slowly, head resting on his paws. "You know," Jake said, "when Diesel was younger, he saved a lot of lives overseas, found bombs before they could go off, pulled men out of burning vehicles. But this is different." Malene managed a small smile. "He's got a good heart," Jake smiled back. "Yeah, he does." Outside, snow drifted softly across the windshield of Jake's cruiser. He didn't start the engine right away, just sat in the quiet. Everything had changed in a few days. A newborn saved, a young girl pulled from silence, and a canine who, even in retirement, never stopped listening. Some dogs never stop being heroes. They just wait for the next soul who needs them. The hospital was filled with a hush. Not the sterile kind, but the quiet that comes when people are hoping for a miracle or bracing for bad news. Jake had spent more nights than he could count in places like this. Crime scenes, ERs, waiting rooms. But today was different. Today wasn't about violence or villains. It was about something much more delicate, a second chance. He watched through the glass as Malene held Theo, the nurses showing her how to support his neck, how to feed him from a bottle. Her hands still shook, but there was a new gentleness in her face, as if something inside her was slowly healing. And beside Jake, as always, was Diesel. Silent, watchful, loyal. The CPS social worker arrived just after noon. Her name was Lauren Brandt. Sharp eyes, calm voice, clipboard tucked under her arm. 15 years old, no prenatal care, living with reported abuse. "You've got a tough case, Officer Nolan," she said as they walked down the hall. Jake nodded. "She needs help, not judgment." "I agree." "That's why I took her file myself," Lauren replied. "The foster father, Charles McKinley, has 3 other kids in the system, all in different homes. There were complaints before, but nothing ever stuck, until now." Jake's jaw tightened. "You think he'll try to find her?" "Not if he knows what's good for him." But Jake knew better. People like McKinley didn't just disappear, they got angry, they got reckless, and desperate men were dangerous. That night, back at home, Jake pulled out an old photo album. He sat on the floor beside Diesel, flipping through pages faded by time. Pictures from Afghanistan. Diesel in his vest. Jake younger and harder. One photo caught his eye. Diesel lying beside a wounded soldier, refusing to leave, even as gunfire echoed nearby. "You never left anyone behind," Jake said, scratching Diesel's graying fur. "Not then. Not now." Diesel leaned into his hand with a soft grunt, as if he understood every word. The next morning, everything began to change. A call came in from the hospital's front desk. Someone was there asking for Malene, a man in his 50s, no identification, refusing to give his name. Security said he never raised his voice, but there was something unsettling about him, something cold. Jake didn't hesitate. He and Lana were in the cruiser and at the hospital in under 10 minutes, Diesel alert in the back seat, ears flicking at every sound. When they arrived, the man was already gone, but security had saved the footage. Together they watched it frame by frame. The man stood in the lobby, hands buried in the pockets of a heavy coat, hood pulled up. As he turned, the camera caught his face. Jake's blood ran cold. It was McKinley, the same foster father Malene had been running from, the one who'd convinced her no one would help. Back at the station, Jake slammed his hand on the desk. He knows she talked. Lana let out a slow breath. "We need to move her now." CPS agreed. By nightfall, Malene and Theo were moved to a secure shelter on the edge of town, placed under emergency protection. Lauren, the social worker, gave Jake a nod. "This gives us a little breathing room, but it doesn't erase the danger." Jake didn't sleep that night. He left the porch light burning, and Diesel sat by the door, eyes fixed on the street until morning. The next day, Jake visited Malene at the safe house. She looked exhausted, older than her years, as if she'd lived a lifetime in just a few weeks. "Do you know why he came to the hospital?" Jake asked. Malene hesitated. "He always said if I ever told anyone, he'd take the baby. He said Theo wasn't really mine, that I didn't deserve him. He said he could do whatever he wanted." Jake's fists clenched. Malene's voice dropped. "He used to watch me, not just in the house. At night I'd hear him outside my door." Jake felt a wave of anger. "And now?" he asked. "I don't think he wants the baby anymore," she whispered. "I think he wants to make sure I'm gone." Back at the precinct, Jake made sure patrol cars circled the Connor house every hour. But McKinley had vanished. No credit cards, no phone activity, no traffic cameras. It's like he disappeared. Jake glanced at Diesel. You think he's out there watching? Diesel's ears perked up, body tense. Yeah, Jake muttered. Me too. That evening, Jake walked Diesel down Maple Lane again. Snow fell in soft flakes, the street empty except for their footsteps and the jingle of Diesel's collar. They paused at the spot where it all began, where Diesel had refused to move, where Theo had been found. Jake looked down at his partner. Why here? Why that moment? What did you sense? Diesel didn't answer, just gazed up at Jake with those wise, steady eyes, and Jake realized maybe it wasn't something Diesel heard or smelled. Maybe it was something deeper. A feeling. A silent plea for help that only a dog like Diesel could sense. Back home, Jake sat with a mug of coffee gone cold. On the table was a manila envelope, CPS updates. Theo was gaining weight, his heart strong, no signs of withdrawal. Malene had been approved for extended protection, but there was a note at the bottom. Subject may be eligible for kinship placement with a responsible adult pending background check. Jake read it twice, then looked at the photo on his fridge, him and Diesel 5 years younger. One protector, one partner, and maybe now a chance to protect again. Not as a cop, not as a soldier, but as something new. Outside, Diesel lifted his head. A car turned the corner, slow and deliberate. Jake's muscles tensed. Diesel stood ready. The threat wasn't over, but this time they weren't chasing darkness. They were defending something good, something worth standing guard for. The wind cut through the morning, one of those Midwest chills that seeps into your bones before you realize you're cold. Jake stood outside the shelter gate, coffee in one hand, the other holding Diesel's leash. He hadn't slept much, and Diesel hadn't stopped scanning the area since dawn. Still no sign of McKinley, Lana said, pulling up and tossing him a granola bar. You'll need more than caffeine to get through another shift. Jake caught it, managing a tired smile. I'll rest when this is over. Lana leaned against the cruiser. You sure you're not getting too close? He didn't answer right away, just looked at the building. Tall, gray, silent. Somewhere inside, Malene was holding her baby, trying to find a way to heal after being made to feel invisible. She's just a kid, Jake finally said. And right now she's doing more to keep that baby safe than most grown-ups I've ever met. Lana let out a breath. You've got a soft spot, Jake shrugged. Diesel chose her. That's enough for me. Diesel wagged his tail once, then settled into a watchful crouch. Inside the shelter, Malene rocked Theo gently while a lullaby played from a small speaker. The baby's tiny hands were starting to grab at her hoodie strings. He was getting stronger every day, but Malene wasn't sleeping much either. The counselor said she woke up every night around 3 a.m., the same time she'd left Theo in the trash bin. Her nightmares weren't about what could have happened, but about what almost did. Sometimes I feel like I'm still in that alley, she whispered during her latest session with Lauren Brandt. Like I'm stuck there, like a part of me never left. Lauren was kind but direct. Trauma doesn't just disappear, but it can be shaped into something new, something stronger. Malene looked down at Theo. He didn't ask for any of this. No, Lauren said, but you still chose to protect him even when you were scared. That means more than you think. Back at the station, a call finally came in. A county gas station on Route 14 had reported a man matching McKinley's description buying a burner phone and a bottle of whiskey around 2 a.m. Security footage confirmed it. Same coat, same build, same cold stare. He's watching, Lana said as they reviewed the footage, waiting for us to slip up. Jake nodded. Then we don't let our guard down. They flagged McKinley's face to every hotel and bus station within 150 miles. But Jake had another idea. He called in a favor from an old contact at Children's Services and requested a review for temporary foster care. I'm not saying she has to live with me, Jake told the director, but if there's no one else, I'm not letting her go back to people like him. The director hesitated. That's a big commitment. Jake glanced at Diesel, sleeping at his feet. I've made bigger decisions with less notice. That evening, Jake drove to the shelter as the sky faded to a deep purple. Inside, he found Malene in the rec room, sketching in a notebook. Theo slept nearby in his carrier. Ever draw with anything besides pencil? Jake asked, sitting down next to her. She smiled faintly. I like pencil. Mistakes are easier to erase, Jake chuckled. That's smart. He paused. You're doing a good job with him. Theo, he seems stronger every time you visit. She nodded. He knows I'm trying. That's all I can do. Jake cleared his throat. Look, I know this is all happening fast, and I know you've got a lot to deal with, but I'm not going anywhere. She looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. What do you mean? Jake leaned in, voice steady. I mean, if it comes down to it, and there's no one else, you and Theo won't be alone. I'll be there for you. Diesel will too. Malene blinked, surprised. You'd really do that? Jake nodded. I don't make promises I can't keep, she swallowed, glancing down at her sketch. No one's ever said that to me before. Later that night, Jake sat on his porch, Diesel at his feet, sipping instant soup as the steam curled into the cold air. His phone buzzed. A patrol unit had spotted a suspicious man on foot just a block from the women's shelter. No confrontation, no crime, just watching. Jake stood so quickly he spilled his soup. Let's go, buddy. Diesel was already up, ready to move. They reached the shelter in 10 minutes. Lana was waiting at the gate, flashlight in hand. Footprints behind the dumpster. We've got motion-triggered video from the alley. The footage was brief but clear. McKinley, standing across the street, staring through the shelter windows, a cigarette burning low in his hand. Then he disappeared into the night. Jake's jaw tightened. He's circling. Lana voiced the question. Waiting for what? Jake glanced at Diesel, who was already facing the direction McKinley had gone. They canvassed the neighborhood, talking to residents, checking rooftops and parked cars. At one point, Diesel gave a sharp, focused bark near a boarded-up duplex 2 blocks away. Jake approached, gun holstered, flashlight ready. The door had been forced open. Inside, empty liquor bottles, a stained mattress, fast food wrappers. On the wall scrawled in marker, "You think you saved her?" Jake felt a chill run through him. That night, they set up full surveillance. Security at the shelter was doubled. Police cars took turns parked at each end of the street. Jake spent the night in his cruiser, Diesel curled up in the back seat. Every few hours, Jake would get out and walk the perimeter, Diesel at his side. He wasn't about to let McKinley win. Not this time. At 3:17 a.m., right on schedule, a shadow moved at the far end of the block. A figure in a dark coat moving quickly. Jake grabbed his radio. Suspect in sight, East End. On foot! He and Diesel moved fast, sticking close to the buildings, boots quiet on the snow-dusted ground. The figure slipped into an alley. Jake followed, Diesel close behind. At the end of the alley, they split left, and there he was. McKinley cornered near a loading dock. Jake drew his weapon. Hands where I can see them. McKinley froze, then did something Jake didn't expect. He laughed, cold and bitter. You're protecting a liar, he spat. You think she's innocent? I don't have to think, Jake replied. I saw the bruises. I read the threats. The moment you put a child in harm's way, you lost your right to be heard. Diesel stepped in front of Jake, a low growl rumbling in his chest. McKinley's gaze flicked to the dog. That mutt ruined everything for me. Jake's eyes narrowed. No, you did that all on your own. They cuffed McKinley and took him in. That night, Malene slept without fear. Theo woke to sunlight, gentle arms, and safety. Jake sat in his cruiser outside the station, watching the stars fade as dawn crept in. Diesel finally slept, his work done for now. But Jake knew the truth. Heroes don't retire. They just rest until the next call for help. Franklin, Indiana was quiet again. The snow was melting, sidewalks turning to slush, kids dragging sleds through puddles instead of snowdrifts. But inside the courthouse, something more important was thawing. The silence that had weighed on Malene for so long. She sat beside Jake on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, gently rocking Theo's carrier. The baby's cheeks were rounder now, his eyes brighter, following her voice across the room. All things no one thought possible that freezing night behind the garbage truck. You ready? Jake asked softly. She nodded. I think so. Her voice still trembled. But not from fear. Just from the enormity of what she'd survived. Charles McKinley had pleaded not guilty to charges of endangerment, coercion, and unlawful restraint. But the evidence, notes, bruises, testimony, told a story even his lawyer couldn't erase. It wasn't just about what he'd done, but what he'd made her believe. That she was worthless, that her voice didn't matter, that love was something you had to earn by staying silent. But Malene had found her voice, and a baby named Theo was alive because of it. The judge's decision granted Malene temporary supervised custody of her son, as long as she continued counseling and stayed in a safe home. She had just turned 16, still a minor by law, but in every way that counted, she was already a mother. After the hearing, the courtroom emptied. Lauren Brandt came over with a box of tissues and hugged Malene tight. "You did it," she whispered. Malene shook her head. "We did." She glanced at Jake and Diesel. They stepped out into the crisp morning. The air smelled of melting snow and car exhaust. Theo stirred in his carrier, and Malene soothed him with a gentle touch. Jake opened the cruiser door. "You sure about this next step?" Malene buckled Theo in. "I know it's not forever, but I want to try," Jake smiled. "Then let's take it one step at a time." They headed back to Jake's house, not as officer and witness, but as a temporary family. The state had placed Malene and Theo with Jake under emergency foster care, thanks to the guardianship request he'd filed after McKinley's arrest. The house was quiet, small, a little dusty in the corners, but it had Diesel, it had space, and most importantly, it had peace. Over the next few weeks, they found their own rhythm. Theo had a small crib set up in the guest room. Jake helped Malene sign up for online GED courses. Diesel was never far from either of them, curling up under Theo's crib every night, ears alert to every creak and gust of wind. Malene had started drawing again, big, sweeping images of animals in motion, eagles, horses, dogs. In one, she sketched Diesel sitting like a sentinel under a full moon, a baby nestled at his paws, the word guardian printed beneath in bold letters. Jake framed it and hung it by the front door. One afternoon, Malene stepped out onto the porch where Jake was repairing a loose railing. Theo was napping inside. Diesel lay nearby, his nose twitching as he dreamed. Malene sat on the top step, hugging her knees. "You know, if it wasn't for him," she said, glancing at Diesel, "Theo wouldn't be here." "I wouldn't be here." Jake paused. "You saved your son." "Don't forget that," Malene shrugged. "I gave up on me." "He didn't," Jake smiled. "That's just how he is. Diesel doesn't care about what people say. He listens to what they don't say." A month later, something unexpected happened. The town council invited Jake and Diesel to a community ceremony honoring local first responders. Jake wasn't keen on going. Too much attention, too many speeches, but Malene insisted. "You can't bark your way out of this one," she teased, nudging Diesel's nose. The ceremony was held in the town square beneath the old clock tower. Police, EMTs, and firefighters were recognized. Then they called Diesel up. The mayor shared the story of the night Diesel barked at the garbage truck, how a life was saved, how a retired dog still knew when something was wrong. The crowd applauded. Some wiped away tears. Jake knelt beside Diesel, resting his hand on his old friend's back. "He never gave up," Jake said, "and he never will." That evening, back at home, they sat together on the porch. Theo in Malene's arms, Diesel stretched across Jake's boots. The sunset painted the sky in shades of apricot and gold. "You think people can really change?" Malene asked. Jake took a slow breath. "I think we don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose what we do next." Malene nodded, watching Theo squirm in her arms. "I want him to know that he wasn't thrown away, that he was wanted." Jake looked at her, his voice gentle. "He'll know, because you stayed, because you fought, because a dog wouldn't let the world ignore his cry." Malene smiled. Diesel snored softly, and for the first time everything felt still, in the best way. In the weeks that followed, Jake kept working with CPS to find a long-term plan for Malene and Theo. He didn't know how long they'd stay, but the house felt more alive now, as if it had been waiting for them all along. One evening, Jake stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, listening to laughter drift in from the living room where Malene was reading to Theo. He realized he was smiling, and when he glanced down, Diesel was looking up at him, tail giving a single thump. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Jake said softly. Diesel blinked, slow and steady. "Yeah, you knew. Sometimes heroes don't wear badges. They wear fur. They don't need words, because their actions say everything. And sometimes they don't save the world with a shout, but with a single bark at just the right time." Diesel hadn't just rescued a baby. He'd reminded everyone what it means to stand up for life, even when the world is quiet, to protect what's fragile, to notice what others miss, and to always believe that some cries are worth hearing. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you'd heard that bark in the night? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more real, moving stories of animal bravery and compassion.